Thanks everyone for joining us today. Today we're going to talk about a brief overview of the Climate Adaptation Science Center and specifically focus on the FY22 funding opportunity that was just released. We'll cover a little bit of background, talk about the specific science priorities for this year, and then go into a little bit of timeline and eligibility, and then open it up for any questions that folks might have. Joined today by Dr. Catherine Smith, who's the director for the Northeast and Southeast CASCs, as well as our partners at NC State University, Carrie Furness and her team, who are helping to host this webinar today. My name is Ryan Boyles. I'm the deputy director for the Southeast CASC. The Climate Adaptation Science Centers are a university and federal partnership focused on developing and delivering science to help resource management professionals deal with climate change, both to understand the impacts and how to adapt to climate change. And in particular, we're looking at resource management agencies that focus on managing and adapting for fish, wildlife, and ecosystems, and broadly the cultural and natural resources that fit under the Department of Interior. We are part of U.S. Geological Survey, which is one of the bureaus of the Department of Interior, and we serve largely as the science arm for doing research and development to support Department of Interior mission and its partners in the states and tribal nations. We are generally focused on understanding impacts and adaptation to foster broader, effective natural resource decision-making around habitat, ecosystems, and how we deal with changing climate into the future. The general basis for our science is connected to a 5-year sort of visioning plan that was released in 2018. This document sort of generally covers the science priorities and operating principles broadly. And then every year we have annual science priorities that derive from this, where we reach back out to a lot of our stakeholder partners, those resource management agencies that are dealing with these challenges, to try and assess what are the priorities for them in the near future around topics of natural resource management and adaptation to climate. And broadly, this is connected to understanding the exposure of these natural resources to climate and an understanding of what the risks they face. And then understanding the impacts both directly to species physiology and biology, but also those secondary impacts to habitat, ecosystem structure, things like disease and invasives. And then finally, our mission is to ultimately get to the point where resource managers have a better understanding of how to make effective climate adaptation decisions. And I think you'll see those reflected in the priorities for this year. So we'll go through some of those FY22 priorities. We'll talk a little bit about who's eligible and then the timeline, and then some frequently asked questions. And then we'll open it up to the audience for any questions that you may have. So as a first priority, we're interested in projects that help us test actual adaptation actions. Now, this can be on pilot scales or at a regional scale. And to the point that it produces information that natural resource managers can actually use to meet their management objectives. This may include, but is not limited to, sort of a demonstration of field or testing of adaptation alternatives. So let's say a resource management agency is dealing with what to do to deal with changing climate. They have a handful of strategies they want to test. That would be a good research question to try to propose. We're also interested broadly in sort of, if not field experiments, it could be model simulations that test the efficacy of alternative adaptation actions. We're also interested in potentially cost-benefit analysis of different adaptation actions, or other information that can help increase resiliency or lessen a climate impacts. In general, projects that are transferable to other areas would be of a higher priority. Things that are seen as broadly applicable is generally seen as more useful. But that doesn't mean that very localized place-based studies are not very important. Second set of priorities that we're looking at are around ecological impacts in particular around aquatic flows and ecohydrology in freshwater and the tidal zones. We have a project that's just rolling out now with data sets and publications. We have a pilot already done, but Dr. Jacob LaFontaine has been leading a team of folks that are developing daily hydrological projections for the Southeast and actually the broader continental US. And so we're interested in how to utilize that data more effectively to, for example, better understand how projected changes in hydrology, including things like changes in high flow or flooding or low flow and drought, or shifts in hydro period or shifts in temperature, and how those might impact ecosystems of interest, freshwater in the estuaries. We're interested also in broadly is how analysis of that data might help us identify where regional freshwater risks or opportunities might be. So for example, can we, what would be the approaches to identify or analyze those daily climate projections of future hydrology to assess what areas might be more resilient and serve as freshwater climate refugia, or those that might be of greater risk of change into the future that may require special attention or adaptation actions. And then finally, under this ecohydrology and better understanding and utilizing this data set that's rolling out, we're interested in projects that can help us and help resource management agencies better access, use, and interpret that data. It's a specialized data set, and we're interested in projects that can help sort of develop, prototype, and test visualization of these projections to convey the hydrological futures that are most relevant. Proposals connecting to that priority should really emphasize a strategy to both test the effectiveness of visualizations and also how resource management agencies and resource users will actually be interpreting that data. We really want to make sure that what gets produced is useful as a pilot, but also then is applicable to the broader management community around utilizing hydrological futures. Finally, we have a priority around what we're calling targeted ecosystems. These are ecosystems that haven't had as much research done, that might need a little bit more. The first is around shallow island habitat, in particular, those that are used by bird rookeries along the Gulf Coast and the South Atlantic seaboard. Super tides have been identified as a concern for the next 20 years, and especially a lot of habitat restoration is trying to ask the question of how much soil and sand needs to be moved. How high do these islands need to be built to make them suitable for bird rookeries, for coastal nesting birds, but not so high that it attracts predatory mammals. So we're looking for proposals that can help the resource management agencies that are doing this restoration, especially along the Gulf Coast, South Florida, along the southeastern Atlantic seaboard, to better understand what those optimal sort of restoration levels should be, at least for the next 20 years, knowing that there's longer term concerns there as well. We're also interested in studies that explore how climate change might affect the structure and viability of terrestrial cave ecosystems, including the species that live and rely on those habitats. And then finally, we're broadly interested in projects that help explore how climate change may impact forest ecosystem structure, in particular focused around migratory bird habitat. So a couple cross-cutting themes of interest that we wanted to emphasize here. First, we're broadly interested in projects that advance diversity, equity, inclusion, sort of best principles in the climate change adaptation sciences and workforce. We also want to stress the value in any proposals that support capacity building with Southeastern tribal nations, including support for tribal-led research or direct participation in the research, address issues of shared government, and/or provide general products and services that are focused on the tribal climate adaptation priorities. We're also broadly interested in human dimensions of climate adapted natural and cultural resource management, which might include, for example, economic or sociological analysis of adaptation options or impacts. Another cross-cutting sort of theme here is how to develop and implement innovative outreach efforts and products that translate science or tools into action. We're interested in proposals broadly that engage in a meaningful and sustained dialogue with management partners and stakeholders throughout the entire cycle of research to help ensure that our science is actionable. And that's one of the key sort of more unique aspects of the Climate Adaptation Science Center program, is this emphasis on actionable science. And so there are a lot of different sort of strategies and methods for making sure the science is actionable. And so we're interested in projects that help really demonstrate best practices there that are relevant for the stakeholders that they're really trying to engage with. And then finally, we're interested in proposals that broadly connect to regional species of greatest conservation need, or listed species that are either directly listed or under consideration under Endangered Species Act, or including fish, wildlife, and habitat that are of economic or cultural importance. And one other special note that we wanted to emphasize is that if you're looking to work with tribal nations or tribal organizations, we really encourage you to reach out to Casey Thornbrew, and his contact information is included in the announcement online before you submit your statement of interest. And Casey's a wonderful resource that's provided from a grant program through BIA to the United South and Eastern Tribes. And he works very closely with the Northeast and Southeast Climate Adaptation Science Centers as sort of our core tribal climate resilience liaison to those federally recognized tribes through USET. And he's going to help you better understand and sort of consider the ways to help ensure that some of those other cross-cutting themes of interest listed above will be competitive, and also make sure that they really address some of the needs and concerns that tribal nations have. So looking at the timeline here, the solicitation came out a little bit later than we'd hoped. We'd hoped to get it out just right after the inauguration. Took a little bit longer to get it approved. Statements of interest are due on Friday, March 19th at 5 p.m. We intend to screen those and solicit full proposals from that statement of interest cohort by April 22nd, and then give PIs as 90 days to put together full proposals. We'll then go through and have those reviewed with the decisions made and notifications of intent to award by that first week in September. Who is eligible to apply? Anyone who is a member of the Southeastern Climate Adaptation Science Center University Consortium, including any faculty at NC State, Duke, UT Knoxville, Auburn, University of South Carolina, University of Florida. In addition, anyone who is USGS scientist at a cooperative research unit, a science center, or any other USGS unit is eligible to apply. Other researchers or practitioners from other organizations are welcome to be co-investigators, collaborators, and partners on any of the projects, but the lead PI must be from either a consortium university or a USGS unit. Now, all of our statements of interest this year are being collected through the RFP Manager submission portal. If you're unfamiliar with this, we really encourage you to log in early, make sure you got your account set up, and that everything is working before you submit your application. Try not to do it the last day. This is a new system. It's been, it was sort of tested last year, but as with any new systems and with a lot of users hitting it around the nation, we want to make sure that there aren't any complications. So do make sure you get everything at least set up and logged in before the last second. This is part of a national RFP release. Every regional climate adaptation science center is soliciting proposals right now, and they're using the same RFP Manager submission portal for collecting those statements of interest. So with that, Carrie, are there any questions in the chat that I should go ahead and answer before we move on to some of the other frequently asked questions?
Yeah, Ryan, if you want to address this, just to make sure that the answer is accurate. So are the new daily hydrologic projections available for download yet from Jacob's project? I mean, they're not on ScienceBase yet. Is that the monthly is there, but the daily is not?
The daily projections are available for a smaller pilot region over the sort of the lower Mississippi basin. So folks who are looking for examples of the data, the others are rolling out over the next coming months. For folks who are interested in those specific research priorities, I would encourage you to reach out to Dr. LaFontaine and talk to him and get access to some of the data and get a better sense. There's also some background information that is published for that pilot region to serve as a reference. That's one of those projects that we had hoped would be done already, but due to COVID and some other complicating factors, it's been delayed a little bit, but should be done before any new project. Those data should be released and available before any new project would get started.
Thanks. I think that's all. I think all the others are clear.
Okay, great. Okay, so a couple of frequently asked questions that often come up. We'll go through these fairly quickly, and then we'll turn off the presentation and open it up for the group. What kind of work do we fund? I hinted at this a little bit earlier. Really our focus on projects that create actionable science, where it's of direct relevance to a resource management decision or information that resource managers feel they need in order to figure out which decisions to make sometimes. A lot of science that we produce is what we consider pre-decisional, and that's perfectly okay. But ultimately, we want it to be closely connected to the resource management needs that have been expressed by agencies working in this field. The ultimate goal is to collectively build a community of both researchers and practitioners that are working together to address these management problems. Can you submit multiple proposals? Yes, actually, applicants are welcome to submit multiple statements of interest to different priorities. They just need to have multiple submissions within RFP Manager. For those who are interested, who are not USGS but are other federal employees, are you eligible to apply? No, we only have these eligibility is only open to USGS researchers or university consortium members. If you have specific questions about this, because we do have some other authorities in which we could fund other projects, reach out to the director, either myself as the deputy or Catherine Smith, if you have specific projects in mind that you'd want to explore. Who is going to review the statements of interest and the invited proposals? In the Southeast, we'll have an internal team that will review the statements of interest, trying to narrow those down to those that we think are sort of the best initial ideas that are presented in a two-page format. And then from that, we have an expert anonymous review panel that will include both technical experts and management experts to review the individual proposals. And then the final decision is held by the center director. Another question that's come up, we've changed the sort of the outline for in the page requirements for RFP as compared to in the past. So budget tables and justifications are no longer included in the 7-page limit. So if you need more room to put detail in there, an Excel budget or a detailed budget justification, when you get to that stage, that's not included as part of the full proposal. You can go as many pages as you need for that. Are non-USGS applicants required to contact the university prior to statement of interest? No. We have through Carrie Furness and the team of folks at NC State University, we have a program manager that handles and sort of manages a lot of the proposals that go through the university side. But USGS, USGS folks will get money directly. But for the statement of interest phase, you don't need to contact or go through Carrie. You don't need to go through any of your other regional university points of contact. You can submit those directly. When we actually go to the full proposal stage, we will make sure that the PIs are aware of cost pass-through issues and make sure there's a dialogue there between the university and USGS folks so that you know what to anticipate and can budget accordingly. Another question that comes up quite frequently is when we expect the awards to be made and when will funds actually be dispersed, and therefore what should be your start date. In the past, this has varied quite a bit. It's been anywhere from 60 to 90 days after the notification of intent to as much as a year after the notification of intent. There's a lot of different factors that are changing right now. So we can't give you a specific timeline. When we get to the point of evaluating individual full proposals, we'll work with the PIs to figure out what's the sort of what we think is the best start date. We are hopeful that our time to make award will improve and that we'll be able to be a little more speedy in that in the future. Another question that often comes up, are in-kind contributions required? They are not. There is no requirement for any matching or in-kind contributions in any of our proposals. And then the final couple frequently asked questions that often come up is around reporting. There is a formal reporting requirement for all university-based research awards. The Form SF 425 is a standard report that every research university is going to be familiar with. In addition, for USGS and university-led projects, we solicit progress reports about every 6 months. We're doing progress reviews right now for a bunch of projects that are that are active right now. That's hopefully a fairly minimal effort by PIs. We don't want to waste your time, but it's a way for us to keep track of where projects are working and doing well. And importantly, if there are things that we need to anticipate making revisions to, so no cost extensions or other budget revisions, that we have plenty of time to prepare for those and not prevent money from getting out the door in a timely way. And then there's also often questions about data management plans for full proposals, and before they get awarded, there does need to be a data management plan associated with every final project proposal. These are a requirement for USGS and actually the broader federal government, that all data be made available as it's collected, given the other concerns that we have around, sometimes there are privacy concerns that we have to be sensitive to. But we want PIs to be thinking about that in advance of their proposal and thinking about that all along the way, instead of it just being an afterthought. So we require a data management plan as part of the full proposal development. So with that, all of this information is available, and this presentation slide deck will be made available also on the science page for the Climate Adaptation Science Center at NC State University. Feel free to reach out to me directly if you have any individual questions about the RFP or any of our science priorities or the process of how to get this submitted. And with that, I will stop share and open it up to any questions folks have.
So Ryan, there's the last message in the chat is one dealing with current graduate students being eligible to apply if they will be a postdoc or PI by the time of the project being awarded.
That will largely be up to your university. If your university will allow you to be considered a PI, then you can submit it as a PI. If they will not consider you as a PI, then no, you would have to have someone else be the lead.
If you have a question, feel free to put it in the chat, or you can, on your bottom bar in your reactions section of your Zoom interface, you can actually raise your hand. Though it looks like an orderly crowd, so you could feel free to unmute yourself and ask a question too.
I see the question from Katie. Building on your statement that broadly applicable work is of more interest to the Southeast CASC than very location-specific projects, are projects that encompass multiple states more of a priority than single state projects? It really depends on the nature of the work that's being proposed. It does not necessarily have to be to cover or be, for example, tested in multiple locations for it to be relevant to multiple locations. So, for example, you could envision any number of projects that might test adaptation efficacy in one pilot area where the results of it are really meaningful to a larger footprint. But anything that is going to be seen as more broadly applicable to a broader stakeholder base or broader set of management agencies is generally going to be seen as more appealing in the review stage. Something that's really only relevant to a small location or one group of folks that really isn't relevant to anyone else is going to be less appealing in the review stage. And I see Gus, you have a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, so in the targeted ecosystems, you have terrestrial cave ecosystems listed. And I was wondering if, like, by that you mean like inland caves, i.e. not marine caves, or you mean dry ecosystems of caves, not aquatic ecosystems of terrestrial caves?
Very good question. Thanks, Gus. We are interested in those inland caves as opposed to marine caves or karst region caves that are connected to the marine environment.
Okay, thanks.
But yes, freshwater systems in cave environments we're very interested in that. We've heard that from several agencies that that's an area where there's just a giant science gap, and they really have very little information about what climate change will mean for them. Some have considered it to be, because it's more cut off from sort of the ambient air background and the air exchange, that it might be more resilient, but there's very little literature out on that.
Yeah, thank you.
I see the question by about the list of faculty affiliates. I think we can paste that link of faculty affiliates that are in there. That is generally associated with NC State, but anyone who is at any of the institutions is eligible to apply. You don't have to be listed as a formal faculty affiliate to submit a proposal, a project proposal.
Ryan, could you address the question that you and I talked about this before we started about how consortium folks or USGS folks in the Southeast, you know, associated with the Southeast, can apply to other regions, and what that partnership might look like?
So because USGS scientists we can fund directly, we don't have to go through a contracting mechanism or a cooperative agreement mechanism. USGS scientists can apply for any priority at science centers. University consortium members are really only eligible for the university consortium, the region that to which they're a member. So for the Southeast, that would mean those institutions, NC State, Duke, UT Knoxville, Auburn, South Carolina, and Florida. If you have scientific expertise and are working connected to in areas that are connected to other regional priorities, reach out to myself or to Catherine Smith, the center director, to have a conversation, because there may be ways that we can put you in contact with other partners that are working in those other regions through those other university consortium, and develop some really nice proposals and relationships. I'll also add that we are very happy to see proposals that include USGS and university partnerships. It does not have to be one or the other. In fact, we love being able to leverage the expertise that we have from our university partners as well as USGS scientists.
So the couple other things that have come in, if you want to clarify about the shallow island habitat research.
There might be more localized priority within the Southeast where the shallow island habitat research. No, actually, this is a broad interest around shallow island and super tide with island restoration. This is of interest across the entire footprint of the Gulf Coast. And so we're looking for methods that can be generalizable and applicable, not just to one or two islands, but to the entire region. And then a question there from Skylar. Are there stakeholders associated with the key ecosystems you've already identified who want to be connected to researchers? For example, are there particular cave managers who know a particular interest? These have been broadly listed. We have points of contacts in state and federal agencies, but they are not always the individual researchers that are already or managers that are actually in the field working in some of these environments. So we really rely on PIs, researchers, and their established networks or their interest to help, bring together projects that resonate. If you have specific questions, feel free to reach out to us. I can try and have a conversation, or Catherine can have a conversation with you, especially if you're just starting out and are not sure how to connect to some of these. We can probably give you some good starting points. Is the SOI total limit 4 pages? I believe it's a 2-page statement of interest limit. And then in the call, there's a priority area that addresses DEI best practices. Is there a document that we can refer to that includes USDS definition of these best practices? There are lots of definitions out there. I think what we're trying to show is that broadly across all of our projects, we are interested in proposals that connect to our science priorities, but then also consider DEI best practices around climate adaptation science.
Ryan, you want to address sort of broadly, sort of like co-production principles and light, connections with, I mean, is that worth addressing at this?
So You may have heard us talk in the past and emphasize co-production. We're actually, co-production is one method that's out there that it helps get towards that actionable science goal, but it's not the only one. And there are various ways of engagement with your partners and resource management stakeholders to help make sure that the science that you're producing is useful to them. So there's a whole spectrum of effort and activity based on how active the management partner can be, how deep your knowledge of the management challenge is, and what established relationships you may already have. So early in a relationship, it may take a more hands-on approach to establish those relationships, or the nature of the management challenge is a little vaguer, and so it requires a little more active and equal partnership with a resource manager or resource management agency. But ultimately, our goal is to get at science products and outputs that are really seen as directly applicable and useful and usable to those resource management agencies. Co-production is one of those methods that are out there, but it's not the only one.
Right, I'm trying to track down if there's actually a template for the SOIs, but so I'll try to pop something in there. But the question of, I do think 2 pages is the right, but the question is there additional allowance for including a budget in that?
And the SOI phase, the budget is very simple, right? It's basic amounts of information. You don't need a fully fleshed out detailed budget at this stage. We're just trying to get a sense of who the partners are and what the general amounts are.
Carrie, I just put a link in the chat with those guidelines. So I'm just confirming, it sounds like the kind of written up section is 2 pages, which are sections 1 through 3. And then it says to add section 4, which is the budget table, as the last page in the SOI PDF. So I'm assuming that's the 3rd page. Just wanted to confirm.
Yeah, I just found the same thing, Katie. Yeah, exactly. I think that's right. But I think to Ryan's point, it is a very high level, a very upper level budget. But the project summary is a page, and some of the other information adds up to a page. So I believe that budget can be a separate table.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah. Thanks, Katie.
Are there indirect cost restrictions on this? Federally negotiated rates are what we honor. So there are no rates that are required. Anything that is part of your full federally negotiated rate is what we agree to pay. Do keep in mind, though, that the budget cap of $400,000 must include that full IDC rate.
Other questions for Ryan?
Folks are welcome to reach out to me directly with any questions you might have after this. Happy to have a conversation, or if it's a simple question, we can even just do it over email. Hopefully this has helped to clarify and give you a sense of what we're looking for this year's funding announcement. Feel free to send along any technical questions you have as well. If you start having problems with RFP Manager, feel free, I can help troubleshoot some of that as well. So if there's no other questions, we'll let everyone get back to their morning. I want to thank you for joining us. Special thanks to Carrie and NC State University for hosting this. And I hope you all have a nice day, and everyone is warm and safe and doesn't lose any electricity.